Spectrovision Radio.
Welcome to Gods, Ghosts, and UFOs, the podcast about all the stuff they said wasn't real. My name is Jordan, and I'm here with Tom and Mallory, who are just the best.
Oh,
The best people, the best co-hosts, the best at everything, really. So honestly, I don't even know why we should just be talking to each other. I don't think
that's what the podcast,
I don't need any of our
the
listeners. I just need you guys.
Yeah. We should share recipes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea, actually.
I have so many great recipes. I made Swiss meringue buttercream for the first time the other day.
Whoa!
That is S tier frosting, my friends. I will tell you.
That's like Great British Bake Off material.
So yeah, because there's like a simple buttercream, but Swiss meringue, does that involve whipping egg whites, I'm assuming?
Yeah, you take some egg whites and some sugar and you heat it up into a certain temperature.
There's heat involved in this frosting?
A double boiler and heat and a thermometer. And then once you
Did
get
you
it
say
to the
double
temperature-
boiler?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then you put it into a mixer and you mix it for like 20 minutes until it cools off, and then you start adding butter. But the butter can't be too cold and it can't be too warm. And it's the best frosting in the whole world. I could eat it by the spoonful. I think I gained 4 pounds over the weekend. Anyway.
Worth it.
Worth the calories.
You earned 4 pounds from your hard work. Yeah. Tom, would you like to start the podcast?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you how to segue from that.
Well,
what about this? What about
recipes.
this? I'm just going to go whoosh. And then you're going to...
Tom does have a story today. Tom has a story today for us. He warned us that it was a real deep dive on haunted dolls. Now, we did talk about haunted dolls a few months ago, last year at some point, but only one haunted doll and only briefly. So I'm actually very excited to hear.
Well, I tell you what got me thinking about this was when we did the Mexico City Mannequins episode, because which was freaked
horrifying.
Mal out, which is one of my favorite things in the world. Mal's flying around in her desk chair, gasping. Someone was like, "It's required viewing just to watch Mal." And then I remember, I was like, "What could this be?" Well, it could be a hoax. Well, it could be people, whatever, making up stories. Or it could be an actual phenomenon. And then Jordan said something like, and for this, I just want to cut to the clip of Jordan going like, "That leaves 1 million things that it could possibly be," And I was like, I cannot stop thinking about what is the ontological question? What is the ontological status of entities that could inhabit human-shaped forms?
Right.
So,
objects with a face, right? That's kind of what we're talking about here.
Functionally, effigy, or just
effigies.
Just not even that detailed, arms and legs.
Yeah.
Because there's an ancient history. Okay, so come with me way back, because the earliest evidence that we have for so-called haunted dolls comes from antiquity, where their use was intended for either activation or containment. And we start with Ushabtis, which were part of a practice that originated in the Old Kingdom of Egypt. So this means like 2600 to 2100 BC. The name translates as answerer. So if the dead were called on to do any work in the afterlife, the Ushabti would respond with, "Here I am," and do the job. So Tutankhamun's tomb had a Ushabti for every day of the year, 365 of them, and 36 overseers. So he was lazy. And in the very early days of Egyptian civilization, there is evidence that servants of wealthy people were sometimes killed so they could continue working in the afterlife. So the Ushabti was developed as a spiritual substitute.
That's such a raw deal. Still a servant even in death. Oh my gosh.
There's so much of that though, where it's like, well, the king died, so all of his servants have to be set on fire now, or what? It's just like, what?
I so hope
it's a lousy
cosmologically
gig.
there is a rude awakening for all of those people on the other side. And instead, it's just totally flipped.
It feels like there will be for all of us. Aren't we all like really wrong? Isn't that all we're learning?
Speak for yourself.
I hope I'm right about this. I hope I'm right that when they all die, the pharaoh then becomes the servant of all of his servants.
That Tutankhamun got some cosmological dope slaps from all of his Ushabti. Okay. The most notorious magical doll from antiquity is known as the Louvre Doll. And it's sort of upsetting. It depicts a naked, bound female in a kneeling position, pierced with 13 needles. It was fashioned from clay, unbaked clay, and it was found in a terracotta vase in Egypt and has been assigned to the 3rd or 4th century. It came with a defixio, which was a curse written on a thin sheet of lead, which would then be rolled up and hidden somewhere. And the defixio named the target, in this case, a woman called Ptolemies, and the man who commissioned the Kolossoi, a man named Serapamon. It's sitting in the Louvre's Egyptian Antiquities Department right now. So these dolls were known as Kolossoi, and their purpose was primarily defensive, although it sounds like the sort of voodoo doll. We'll get into that later. So according to one ancient sacred law, if a hostile spiritual being was sent after a household, male and female kolossoi of wood or clay were to be constructed and offered food. And then once the proper procedures were performed and that spirit was contained inside that effigy, they were to be taken far off to a forest in which no cutting had taken place and fixed to the ground where they could no longer cause any harm. Now, this brings me to a poignant and creepy expression known as Victorian mourning dolls. Have you guys ever heard of this?
It kind of rings a bell. I'm not sure.
Yeah, same. But I'm trying to remember why.
It's really sad. The infant mortality rate in Victorian times was very high. So when a child would die, many times a doll was made at the funeral or the wake, like made out of wax, and presented. It would have clippings of the child's hair. It would be clothed in the child's clothing. And the faces would be vacant, emotionless. The eyes would be closed. And they were filled with a weight like sand or heavy cloth to be the same weight as the child. So they were frequently displayed lying with the deceased on the deathbed. They were displayed in miniature coffins. And what they were functionally was an idealized image of death, which is what's so poignant about this, because many infant mortalities at that time were caused by disfiguring illnesses like smallpox, scarlet fever, tuberculosis, diphtheria, and the doll offered a presentable representation of the family's loss. The departed child might have been gaunt and ravaged, but the effigy would look as though it had just gone to sleep. So it wasn't a replica of the living child. It was a corrected version of the dead one. And they often were flattened at the back of the neck so they would lay naturally as possible. So functionally, the doll was engineered to be a corpse. Now, unsurprisingly, some parents couldn't bear to bury the mourning doll with their child, which is what typically happened. Instead, they would keep it and put it in a crib and would change its clothes and treat it more or less like a real baby, which is the only reason why we have surviving examples today. And you can go online and see pictures of Victorian mourning dolls. Now, by the 1870s, death kits were available for these dolls, complete with little coffins and mourning clothes, and this was a way to help train girls for participating in funerary rites. So the girl would practice dressing the doll. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Hold on. Hold on, Tom.
Yeah.
The reason that I had a Cabbage Patch doll is technically because we started giving girls dolls to prepare them for death, not actual mothering.
No, I think dolls predated mourning
Okay.
dolls.
Okay,
Actual just.
Okay, I was like,
doll
is this
predate-
the origination of the baby
think-
doll?
I
We're
think,
about to get the wrong takeaway from this story.
oh man.
I'm sorry.
And why
I
would
just
you
really
make it look
needed-
like a Cabbage Patch doll? I mean, maybe because you would want to bury it. I don't know. There's nothing funny to say here. I think motherhood sort of predates.
Oh, for sure. But I
Childless
just didn't know if we
motherhood.
thought about making a little corpse baby until. Anyway, I get it now.
Oh,
Fun fact about
okay.
my Cabbage Patch doll.
Yes.
One time, it had like an open mouth. It had an open mouth for a bottle. And one time, I lost a tooth and I stuck my tooth in its mouth. And I couldn't get it out. So the tooth
What's funny about that, Mal, is that you were actually participating in an ancient ritual, which we're going to get to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get there. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Odd.
okay.
I can't get the
Getting
mental
back
image
to
out of
little
my
girls
head.
playing with doll corpses, if I can.
Okay. Woohoo.
So they're rehearsing death rituals with these effigies as a matter of domestic education.
Wow.
So the doll as a corpse stand-in was completely normalized. But here's what I found shocking, actually, in my research, was that there are no well-documented paranormal cases specifically attached to Victorian mourning dolls, which is weird to me, because
crazy.
you would think
Yeah.
like their creation was so ritualized, there was so much emotion going into it. They would have the actual hair of the child, the actual clothing. They were made to look like an accurate effigy. And some of them were cared for by grieving parents for years, maybe decades. If there was any object that was engineered, even unintentionally, to attract residual attachment, this is it. But no. And what's more interesting is that there is a complete overlap between the rise of spiritualism and the mourning doll. So you would have grieving parents go to a medium to see if they could contact their dead child, while they would also have a mourning doll. So you again would think that we would have some record of an inhabited or haunted mourning doll. Not the case. And I think maybe the absence of that evidence is informative unto itself, because I think, the doll was this intended in some ways to be this sort of public facing aspect of a process that was intensely personal. So pretty much if these dolls were kept, they were kept in a way and treated in a way that was completely private. And if anything did happen, that was not going to make it into the records.
Sure.
Until a doll started moving on its own in the first half of the 20th century.
Here we go.
And that's on to part two. So that's the part two.
Well, I mean, immediately my first thought was maybe they knew that if they did the wrong things, they would wind up with haunted dolls, and that at some point people got careless, and maybe that's why.
Ooh. That's a
People
fun
have always
idea.
been. I mean, if people weren't careless, we would not have any horror movies at all, would we?
That's true.
Somebody just doing
Don't
something
go up
really
the
stupid.
stairs.
What are you doing,
Or
you
down
idiot?
the stairs, frankly. Don't go up or down the stairs.
Do not
okay?
use stairs.
This brings us, even if we don't particularly want to go, to Robert the Doll. Have you guys heard of Robert the Doll?
Robert
sounds
the doll?
sounds very.
You
friendly.
don't know Robert the Doll?
I don't think so.
Whatever
I'm
you
looking him
do,
up.
don't look up his picture.
No? Oh, gosh.
Too late. Oh. Oh no.
The first well-attested case of spontaneous movement in a doll. So Robert, who's still with us, yay, is a one-of-a-kind handmade doll created around the turn of the 20th century. He's 40 inches tall, stuffed with a wood wool called Excelsior, for a reason that I have no idea. Dressed in a sailor suit, which really adds to the ambiance.
does.
And he used to have painted features, like a jester. Again, thank you.
A jester?
A jester, yeah, like a proto-clown. This is great for the haunted doll.
Clown sailors.
So idea was, I think, that he was fashioned in the image of his boy, his constant companion, literally his constant companion, a boy named Robert Eugene Otto. The doll took the name Robert, and the man went by Gene. And the first hint that something out of the ordinary was happening was one night when Gene, who was by that time 10, awoke to find Robert sitting at the end of his bed, staring at him.
Oh.
And then moments later, his mother was awakened by his screams and the sounds of furniture being thrown around his room. And when she finally was able to open the door, which she was not able to do, she found Gene curled up like in a fetal position on his bed in terror, the room in complete shambles, and Robert sitting at the foot of his bed. Now, from that point on, Gene's parents would hear two voices coming out of his room.
Oh,
God.
Their sons and a different one.
oh no.
And they would hear giggling and objects would move. And they blamed Gene, right? They just were like, the kid's doing
He's
this.
doing voices. He's doing voices.
Gene's doing that. Right.
Okay.
Except that the earliest reports we have of Robert doing things on his own cognition emerged in the late 1940s when children in Key West, this is where this all took place, in Key West, Florida, saw the doll moving in the window of the Otto family home at 534 Eaton Street. And these reports are from independent witnesses before Robert was famous, and they all described the same thing. The doll would appear in the window when the family was away, and it would move in between windows. And these were kids. These were kids who'd be on their way to school. And their reports were consistent, and they had nothing to gain. So Gene goes on to become a prominent visual artist in Key West, and he marries a woman named Anne, and when they move into the family home, he brings Robert down from the attic, which did not please his wife.
Oh my gosh.
He built
Why not?
Robert his own room, complete with his own furniture and toys, including a teddy bear for the doll. And he kept him in the turret studio, which was Gene's studio, had the best light in the house, which is where Robert spent his days propped up against the southwest window. Eventually, Anne was like, I'm done, and put him in the attic. And then what followed were footsteps that they could hear from the attic, sounds of pacing, and childish giggling.
Laughing.
And neighborhood children reported seeing Robert watching them from the window of the upstairs bedroom, not the attic, and told stories of the doll mocking them as they walked to school. I'm not sure how. Now, when Gene heard this, he goes up to the attic to investigate. Robert's not there. When he goes into the bedroom, Robert is sitting in the rocking chair by the window. So Gene locks Robert back in the attic several times, and each time would find him again sitting in the rocking chair by the window. A later owner of Robert said that when Gene would say or do something hurtful to Anne, he would tell her, I didn't do it, Robert did it.
Oh my gosh.
And this is the same deflection he would use as a child for whatever, spilled paint, broken toys.
Okay.
Okay, Gene Otto died in 1974 after spending nearly 70 years with Robert the doll. There are a number of compelling firsthand accounts about Robert. One of them is from a journalist named Malcolm Ross. And this is highly credible because he was a skeptic by disposition. He wasn't a believer, and friends brought him to the house. And the Key West Art and Historical Society's website has his own account, which I'll quote from. It was like a metal bar running down my back, he said. At first, when we walked through the door, the look on his face was like a little boy being punished. It was as if he was asking himself, who are these people in my room and what are they going to do to me? Then, when one of his companions made a dismissive comment about Gene Otto, Robert's expression turned to one of disdain. There was some kind of intelligence there, said Ross. The doll was listening to us. There's another account from a plumber who visited the house sometime after 1974. He's called into the artist's house, And he claimed to have heard laughing, and when he looked to find the source, he noticed the doll had moved across the room. Now, this is classic unimpeachable because this dude was a plumber who was brought in to do a job. He didn't know anything about this. He had no reason to make anything up. And also the laughter and then relocation report, it's consistent across the Robert the Doll canon. There was a caretaker of the artist house in the 1980s named Poochie Myers. And she described seeing, now this is really interesting, she described seeing the spirit of a little girl sitting on the staircase, a biracial girl, about 5 years old, with long brown curly hair, wearing an old-fashioned nightgown. Myers said the little girl seemed angry. Multiple visitors to the museum subsequently reported seeing the same apparition near Robert's display, a female child of mixed race, same description, without any of them having heard Myers' account. Myrtle Reuter purchased the auto home in 1974 after Jean died. Apparently, Anne either died previously or wanted nothing to do with it, so she became Robert's companion and kept him when she moved to Von Pfister Street 6 years later. But in 1994, she donated Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum. And the story goes that she plunked Robert down in a chair in museum director Joe Pay's office and said, quote, "This is Robert, and he's part of the Otto family, and I can't stand him being in my house anymore." She said she locked Robert in a room after noticing that he moved on his own, after which Robert locked her in a room.
What?
Yeah. "He's haunted," she said to Pace. Now, when Pace suggested that she keep him, she insisted on filling out the donation paperwork on the spot, left, and died less than 3 months later. The thing I want to say about Robert is that Robert satisfies both type A and type B phenomenon with respect to these kinds of inhabitations, by which I mean the watching, following conversations, wanting to be around people, giggling, typical of type B. That's inhabitation, childlike, seeking connection. But the malevolent streak, throwing furniture, locking people in rooms, the curse on disrespectful visitors, which we'll get into, that's type A. And Robert the Doll may be the only case where both of these phenomena are manifest in the same object.
Really?
Yeah, consistently. And we have now more than a century of independent witness attestations. Now, you can still visit Robert in Key West if you want to. And it's strongly advised that you ask his permission before taking a photograph, because the museum has thousands of apology letters that have accrued over the years by people who did not do that and subsequently experienced in their own account significant misfortune.
Okay. I don't like Robert the Doll.
He may not like
interested.
you.
I'm not interested in visiting Robert the Doll. I don't need any pictures of Robert the Doll. I wish I hadn't looked at any pictures of Robert the Doll.
Yeah.
I also would like not to hear about any more haunted dolls today, Tom. I know you've got more material. I know you do. I know you've prepared much, much more. And I'm going to request that we save it for another episode so that we can adequately respond.
Okay, I don't have any more Robert the Doll stuff because good Lord knows one's enough.
Yeah.
But I have a lot more material.
I know you do. I know you do, Tom. Right. I know you do. Mel, I'd like to get a group conscience on this.
Listen, I'll do whatever you guys want.
I'm a glutton for punishment, and I want to go deeper. That's
Mallory, you've betrayed me. I thought for sure you would be on my side.
No, not today.
I thought Mal would have folded by now. I thought Robert would have sent Mal into the stratosphere.
Well, listen, Robert the Doll is actually just making me more curious than anything, because your thoughts about the type A and type B, I don't think I'd heard of this before.
I've never heard that before, no.
So these are classifications for inhabitations specifically?
Yeah.
Because it's interesting to me that we would have those classifications, because it seems like type B could facilitate type A. You know, like oh, it looks like he's trying to connect with me so he can lock me in a room and starve me. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm curious about the ways that those came to be. I'd be super interested in learning more about those classifications.
Okay, there's the connective tissue to all of everything that I've just said. There is a phenomenon that is the binding agent of all of it, and it's called poppet. And
Did you say puppet? Okay.
Poppet, like puppet with an O, poppet.
A poppet. Okay.
A poppet.
Yeah. It's what they call Keira Knightley in Pirates of the Caribbean. You know,
well,
hello, poppet.
Hello, poppet.
Right. It is an affectionate term, a familiar term for a girl or like I've called, Willa the puppy poppet. That's not what this is. Well, the etymology is the same. Poppet travels from European folk magic. The word is derived. It's a 14th century Middle English word. It's ultimately derived from the French back to Latin from the word pupa, which means girl or doll. But what I'm speaking of is something that Ember's talked about. So I went over the outline of this episode with her, and Robert the Doll and Mourning Dolls and Ushabtis, and she's like, well, poppets. And I'm like, don't know poppets. She goes, yeah, it's root magic, it's hoodoo. So I looked it up. Hoodoo poppets are handmade dolls, typically stuffed with whatever variety of materials, used to establish a magical link with a specific person. The practice in hoodoo is a synthesis rather than a borrowing. This is what's super cool to me because it's analogous to Southern cooking. It draws on West and Central African spirit work traditions brought to the Americas through the slave trade, filtered through contact with European folk magic, and crucially with indigenous American botanical and spiritual knowledge. So the result is something that doesn't reduce cleanly to any of its traditions, thank God, because synthesis are the greatest things. That's what jazz music is, So the African root of it is the most important and the least discussed, I think, because it functionally originates from the Congo and that cosmology. It's one of the two dominant strands flowing into hoodoo, particularly in the coastal southeast. So a nkisi is a charged object, like a container for spirit force. And that spirit force is known variously as nsanda or bilongo, that can be directed toward particular ends. So nkisi aren't dolls in the way like we think of dolls. They're often more abstract, but the underlying logic is identical. A physical container is prepared, charged with specific materials and intention, and then becomes capable of acting on the world on behalf of the practitioner. Now, that sounds just like Ushabti. It sounds more or less like the Kolossoi that we talked about. And I don't know that there was that intention of action on the part of Victorian mourning dolls or necessarily Robert. Now, the thing that everyone thinks about immediately are voodoo dolls. And when you say voodoo dolls, you think of sticking pins in a thing and causing pain. That's actually quite rare for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that most practitioners understand that if you go into that sort of dark magic stuff, the odds of it redounding back on you are high, and it's not really something to fool with. I'll get into that later. Those are known as nkisi nkondi, or nail fetishes. That's called like sticking. So, these figures would be studded with nails or blades and whatever. Each nail would represent an oath or something. And that's the parallel with the Louvre Doll, right?
Right.
Who's stuck with all those needles. That's not coincidental. It's the same cosmological grammar, right? It's the same language being expressed. So poppets work by an operative principle called fixing. And the doll is charged with materials that create a specific link to the target and with a specific intention toward them. So the stuffing kind of dictates everything. If you're making a poppet to draw love, you use different materials than if you want to cause harm or bind someone or protect against someone. So common fixing materials include stuff that relates to the target. Their hair, nail clippings, skin cells, handwriting, personal effects, anything they've touched, which establishes a link, as well as roots, herbs, curios specific to the working. These are called workings, like graveyard dirt, sometimes petition papers. You remember when we were talking about the golem and how you have to put the shem in its mouth to get it to do what you want. Same thing. You can write a person's name down a specific number of times, fold the paper a certain way, put it in the doll's body. So this reminds me of the Victorian mourning dolls. You have cuttings of the child's hair that's on the doll. And hoodoo operates on the principle that a person's physical leavings retain a connection to that person. So hair's cut last Tuesday and you get some of that hair, that's still functionally part of them. So the doll becomes effective not because something possesses it, it's like a body double. The target is literally present in it, so you're not creating a vessel for a spirit, you're creating a second body that you can manipulate and work toward your ends.
I just have so many thoughts, they compound in my brain. So first call out to a very popular movie that was Oscar nominated, Weapons. She won an Oscar, actually.
Right.
I just watched it last night. Great acceptance speech, wonderful performance. So I don't want to, no spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, but there's a lot of this, let's call it hoodoo magic going on.
And Mal said that thing during Mexico City Mannequins, that the way that one was described was the way those kids are in that movie with respect to its arms, how it moved its arms.
Just straight arms.
Yeah. So maybe this has just become a Weapons Talkback podcast. Anyway, so I'm really fascinated by this because it makes a ton of sense from a psychological standpoint. We are attached to things. We can attach ourselves to things. We can fray our identity psychologically across many different objects. I've never forgotten that great speech in Up in the Air that George Clooney gives about how we're sharks. And, he says, put everything in your life in a backpack, and you're carrying this backpack around. And, he's saying, like, we should get rid of the backpack so we can be fast and agile and not be weighed down by anything. So, all of us exist in some sort of state of connection to some number of objects, of things that are attached to our identity in some way. And what you're saying is that in this branch of magic, you can take a person's attachment to an object, and you can use that attachment in a way that is somehow...
You create the object.
Right. Well, you create the object using potentially, like you said, like maybe their handwriting or something that matters to them, which is...
Absolutely things that have attachment to that person.
Right.
You have to have that. Otherwise, it doesn't activate.
Yeah. So can we talk just for a moment about this activation, so to speak? Like, is this...
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm doing is I'm asking, is this real? And I don't know. I mean, I see it in movies, so it must be real. Otherwise, they wouldn't make movies about it.
Chucky's real, apparently, according to Robert.
Yeah, Robert. Yeah. So what I wish we had at our disposal is like some machine that we could like feed all the anecdotes and their provenance to. So like all the stories, all the eyewitness accounts of like Robert the doll and like what he did or whatever, and just feed all of the stories and all of the accounts into a machine, including like where all the stories came from and whatever, and then be like, what is this statistical probability that these things could be coincidence, could be hearsay, could be whatever, versus wow, there's something here, right? Like
two things about that. One, there is a story about Robert the doll that directly connects to poppets and hoodoo magic.
Okay.
The second is it's the Charles Fort idea. There's no one data point that's going to convince anybody.
Certainly not.
No.
Yeah.
But when you collect them and collate them and stack them up over time, for example, with Robert, we have a century of eyewitness reports. These people didn't know each other, and what did they have in common?
Right.
You look at the maximal diversity of the eyewitnesses or the firsthand experiencers, and conversely check the consistency of their reports, something emerges, right? And the question about whether or not this sort of root magic, quote unquote, is real, hell yes, it's real. People do it and continue doing it. So what you can say unambiguously is that people believe it's real.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. What Brother Richard said, like, we are, before anything, after everything, utilitarian. So we keep doing it.
Yes.
Because at least, at the very least, we think it's real. And so if we didn't think it was real, and if it didn't work in some way that felt real or useful, then we wouldn't keep doing it.
Also, how far back does it go?
I mean, it
that
looks like
some part
goes,
of human, like a fingernail clipping or hair, goes on this effigy, and that somehow empowers it. Even Mal unthinkingly putting her tooth into the Cabbage Patch doll's open mouth.
You made a poppet.
I mean, you could have done.
Poppet.
Made your own poppet.
Of myself.
What
for yourself?
What
you
that,
go to
what
school.
That doll do
you do the homework.
Do my bidding, Ushabtis.
Let me tell this story about the Otto family, about Robert, because the story goes that they were a wealthy family, by the way. Their house, Jean's childhood house in Key West, is gorgeous. If you're ever in Key West, go visit it. Robert's not there. The story goes that the Otto family employed a servant woman who was variously described as Bahamian, Haitian, or West African, who practiced either voodoo or obia, which is the Afro-Caribbean folk magic tradition of the Bahamas and Jamaica, which is distinct from but related to hoodoo, because hoodoo is what made it over to the States. The family allegedly mistreated this woman. The nature of the mistreatment is never specified, but before she left their employ, she gave the young Jean a doll as a parting gift, and the implication is that she had worked on it, and that the doll was not a gift, but a vehicle for retribution. So that's one of the origin stories of Robert. Now, there's a researcher from Key West named David Sloan, and he identified the servant woman as someone named Emmeline Abbott, so she was a real person. And one of his theories is that the spirit inhabiting Robert may be that of her deceased child, who possibly might have been Jean's half-sibling.
Oh, boy.
By Thomas Otto, which, if true, transforms the origin story, right? It's no longer a curse laid on an enemy. It's a grieving mother placing her dead child's spirit in a doll and giving it to the child's half-brother to be loved and looked after, which would also partially explain why Robert kept this doll and took such care of him for his entire life. That's a Victorian mourning doll made by a black woman using Afro-Caribbean spirit work for a child who had no grave in the Otto family plot and no legitimate claim to their care. So under that reading, the retribution element may be real, but secondary, the primary act was ensuring this woman's child had a home. And then when you look back on the stories of the apparition of the mixed race 5-year-old angry girl, and you start to go like, wait a minute, the doll mocking kids as they walk to school, because this kid didn't get to go to school, right? The doll having a malevolent streak or a retributive streak. It kind of all sort of snapped into place for me.
Yeah, wow, what a story. Can we start a free Robert campaign and get the
No, we can't.
No.
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 Hear me
no
out.
Free.
No,
okay?
Hear me out. Is this child's spirit bound to Robert the doll?
I don't know.
In a way that the child's spirit could be freed if we destroy the doll? The doll must be destroyed,
Lord.
Tom. Oh. We must destroy the doll.
Off you go. Listen, we can do a whole series. We can do a whole series on this. It's Jordan driving in his car down to Key West. It's Jordan breaking into the Key West Museum at night. It's Jordan mysteriously disappearing. It's Jordan doing a James the UFO YouTube live stream. And poof, he's gone.
Real.
It's me and Mal reallocating time to produce episodes of a podcast because our co-host has disappeared as the result of a vengeful doll. Listen, man, that's content. Go for it. I support you.
I support you, Jordan. You
do it, man. You do you.
It's interesting that you circled it back to the mocking and jeering, because I made a note about that.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, just in terms of what Jordan was asking, it's the unrelated stories, the people from the unrelated people's stories
Yeah.
and their negative feelings around the doll that I find the most upsetting, I think. Because it's one thing to be like, oh, this person has all these stories, and it's not about doubting the one person, but it's what you were talking about with the Charles Ford thing, that it's like, there's only so much we can do with that. But like, why do so many people who don't know the story of the doll feel icky around it? And the other question I have too, which seems really stupid, is like, why so many holes in his face? Why does he have holes in his face? And maybe that's just age and time. But if you look at that face, I can't imagine it making expression of any kind.
No.
Like,
no.
when they're like, he looked like a child who was like, did I do a bad? And then when we offended
Then he
him,
looked
he was
mad.
like, how dare you?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't see how on this like Muppet, like it less than a Muppet face. That actually really terrifies me. The image of a doll like that doesn't even have eyebrows, just giving you the sense that it's really angry.
The evil eye.
I mean, that makes me feel so cold inside.
What did that guy say? He said it was like a metal bar in his back,
From
like that
a
feeling
doll
of
that like has
Oh,
these
yeah.
two bead eyes. You know what I mean? It's like that's wild to me. But I think one of the things that I'm taking away from this, or at least I'm just gauging where I'm at personally, spiritually, supernaturally, is that I feel like you don't necessarily need to understand or know the truth of a thing to react to stories. And then, like, when you have experiences where perhaps you come upon a doll, to respect the unknown around that doll. You know, like, that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm like, I don't know what's real or true. I don't know if that's even the right barometer for anything we talk about on this podcast.
Sure.
True or false?
Sure.
Is that really what we're talking about? But
No.
what about respect for the unknown? Perhaps we don't mess. Perhaps we, get our ice cream and we keep walking. You know what I mean?
I mean, again, Brother Richard, right? Where the idea
yeah.
is that all entities you encounter, you treat them with respect and you acknowledge them. And you don't do what they ask necessarily. What's the big problem with Robert the doll? If you don't ask his permission to take a photograph, you're in for some trouble.
I want to read some of the apology letters.
You said thousands,
Thousands?
right?
That's what I've heard. Yeah. They have a whole thing. You can go on their website. I don't have it to hand,
we'll
but you
put
can
it-
go on that museum website.
Tom, we're going to expect a supplemental
Okay,
on this
all right.
because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want, you know what I really want? I want
Hmm.
like a neuroscientist studying these kinds of hauntings.
Can I talk about
so
that in a
badly.
minute?
Of
Can I
course
talk
you're
about
ready.
that?
Let's go. Yes.
Well, before you do, I do want to be, just because I want the opportunity to sound smart. I was just going to talk about
please.
I was going to talk about the Kuleshov effect. When the guy is up there and he says, we were doing this and the doll looked, guilty, and then he looked mad. And I just can't help but think about the editing juxtaposition. It's like, well, you're doing this thing and then you're looking back at the doll and you're like, what does the doll think? Like, of course the doll's like to your mind, the doll's going to look like all kinds of things because based on what you're doing or what your own perceptions are. Like,
You know what it makes me think of immediately is Eisenstein, because we're all film people.
yeah.
So Eisenstein did this thing where he was the first guy to really invent editing, right?
Well, that's
so
what I
he
was
did
talking
this
about.
thing
The Kuleshov effect.
The Kuleshov
is that.
effect.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Where
that's
it's
the
like
thing.
you have a picture of a man's face.
Yep.
You cut to a picture of delicious food.
He
You
looks
cut back
hungry.
to the man's face and
And
you
everyone's
say,
like,
what
"He
is the
looks so
man
hungry."
thinking? And he looks hungry, even though he has no expression at all.
Yep.
Is that what that's called, the
Yep.
Kuleshov
It's called
effect?
the Kuleshov effect. Yeah.
Oh, film
We were thinking about the
students,
same thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can't go to film school for 7 years and not pick up something.
Can I also say that, like, that this is also part of the reason good directors make actors look like such good actors? They can literally take
yeah.
a blank face of yours and make it
And good
feel like an
editors.
incredible, subtle performance.
Good editors.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Which is very, very cool. Well, yeah, so the neuroscience that I feel like I'm immediately going to is the idea that the reticular activating system that sees red cars after you've shopped for a red car. We've talked about that before on the podcast, but like how much of the experiences that we have with something like this doll comes like I'm just thinking about the letters particularly. So like you think you've been cursed by this doll because you have a bad day, you know, or something, you know what I mean? Like what would encourage this many people to specifically draw their bad luck or whatever misfortune that might be happening to them to the doll enough that they would think they would need to apologize? And am I getting that right? Like it feels like that is why they wrote the letters, right? Like that they went forward in time and had experiences
and there's a similar,
and thought, sorry, Robert.
There's a similar phenomenon where people will take stuff from sacred sites and return it, and often include a letter. I don't have any to mind. I think the Bell Witch Cave, I think there's stuff where people take stuff.
Sure.
Like bad things happen. They're like, I am sorry.
Yeah.
And again, it could be a person trying to maybe expiate something they consider to be negative and there's no relation at all. Correlation is not causation, but then again, how many letters do they have?
Right.
And
like
what kind of stuff is being described? And that's where the real that's where the truth of it is going to lie, I think.
If you had told me that the number were 10, I would be like, oh, well, it's possible that there are 10 people who write a lot of apology letters. You know, like I write an apology letter every time I get a bad feeling.
Yeah.
Like one time.
Self-selection bias going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
But thousands of people having that particular response because they can't do anything but that. I mean, like I've deleted the photo or I just want you to know that I've burned it or whatever. Maybe that's
I've never written a letter in my life.
Yeah. That the thousands number is doing a lot of work. So I'm going to have to nail that down.
It is. It's doing a lot of work for me as far as my respect for these dolls.
To address the neuroscience of it, I actually, I'll talk a little bit about evolutionary psychologists as opposed to neuroscientists. And the idea is that as we know, people there is a universal propensity for anthropomorphism. Anything that looks a little bit like a face, or a little bit like a person, we attribute mental properties to that. We start more or less treating those things like a person. And the point of this is that some evolutionary psychologists have proposed that may be the basis for the belief in supernatural beings. That individual differences in anthropomorphism were associated with structural differences in the right temporoparietal junction, indicating a crucial role of the theory of mind network. So the skeptic, the materialist, would say humans are wired to see intentionality in human-shaped forms. So if there's anything that might be a little weird or ambiguous coming from a mannequin or a doll, they're going to perceive it as being intelligently driven, right? Even when it isn't. Now, the alternate reading, the Gods, Ghosts, and UFOs reading,
come on,
is that the same neural hardware that makes humans, project consciousness onto human-shaped forms might also make those forms receptive to consciousness. So if attention shapes what it encounters, as mystical traditions and quantum mechanics both claim, and if humans pour an unusual density of attention onto things that look like people, then human-shaped forms might genuinely accumulate something, not through magic, but through the poorly understood mechanics of consciousness interacting with matter over time. And in fact, when you look back at poppets, practitioners will say that poppets that they've worked on for a long time will gain a personality that is unique to them. Which brings me to the night parade. 1,000 years ago, demons marched through the streets of Kyoto. And some of them were vengeful spirits known as tsukumogami, which are everyday objects like hammers or umbrellas. And this is a belief. This is a Shinto belief. in Japan that when an object like a hammer or a lamp or an umbrella turns 100 years old, it gets a soul. And if these things are tossed aside without a proper burial, they become vengeful. They become yokai, which is an angry supernatural entity, usually typically angry at his former owner. Now, we all love the movie Spirited Away, and a lot of that movie is based on this thing called the night parade and this Japanese concept of tsukumogami. Now, the night parade was called the Hayaki Yagyo, and basically they're devils said to have caused chaos in the streets and broke stuff, caused mischief, and that continued until the yokai were appeased through rituals. Now, it's still going on. It's a mythological event now, where all the ghosts and oni and yokai and tsukumogami and other supernatural creatures leave their homes and parade through the streets of Japan. And the trick is that people are not allowed to look. If you go outside or if you peek out of a window, you're either killed or spirited away. So the prohibition on looking, it's not just a safety instruction, it's a cosmological statement. It's like, this cannot be witnessed by humans and continue happening, right? The moment that the observer collapses the waveform, something's broken, and in this case, the human is destroyed or taken away. That's the amazing thing about humans and these entities. These things don't just exist in human absence. Human presence prevents it from happening or damages them or damages the human, and that is a perceptual boundary. But the thing to note is that these are not aliens or devils. These are city residents. They're just household objects, things that are around us all the time. And the city's their home. So the humans leave and these things come in. This is part of what got me, that I was thinking so much about the Mexico City Mannequins. And now there's a parade. There's been a parade in Kyoto called the Ichijo Hyagi Yagyo, forgive my pronunciation. It's been going on since 2005, and mostly now it's human beings that are creating mischief, sometimes in a way that's not particularly safe. So I want to know what kind of entities move in. What are we talking about here? One could be the tsukumogami, which is a kind of an animist accumulation. In other words, nothing moves in. The soul and energy is endogenous into the object, and it just manifests itself through attention. So the soul, the mannequins in Mexico City would have souls appropriate to their function, right? They're human-shaped, they're attuned to the gaze, and their existence is oriented toward being seen. The other is the idea of jinn, which is a Muslim idea. It's found in Islamic writings. Jinn are separate creatures. They live in the world. They can see us. We can't see them. They live away from people. They live in caves and deserted places, graveyards, dark places. But they live here, right? They don't come from somewhere else. They're capable of assuming human form or animal form and can inhabit trees and rocks and ruins and the earth and air and fire. So this framework is one of cohabitation. Now, generally, they're not particularly nice, but they're subject to the same sort of holy judgment that human beings are. They have their afterlives. They have their own interiority. There's a type of jinn called a kareen, which translates to the one who accompanies, and it's believed that each person has one. Typically, again, they're not seen as particularly nice. It's just more of a shadow that walks alongside you that can sort of get you into trouble. It's the sort of devil on your shoulder.
Yeah.
So when humans leave, if this was the case, and jinns took over, right? Because they're always there. The idea is that what I was talking about at the beginning of the show, the non-dual consciousness framework is primary in this. Like the form is secondary. The consciousness that can move into a space and inhabit an object or an effigy, that boundary is porous between the observer and the observed. If you think about, like, with respect to the Mexico City Mannequins, I was like, there's some tie-in with lockdown. And it was like an inadvertent controlled experiment because you have this incredibly busy boulevard, the Paseo de la Reforma, that is suddenly emptied. And there's a negative space. You could never do this in real life. It had to be lockdown. People are suddenly gone. It's like the tide going out.
Creates a kind of a vacuum, like a natural
creates a vacuum that gets filled.
Yeah.
And
like
so
a vacuum of attention or consciousness. So some
precisely
kind of attention or consciousness has to rush in. I love that.
So when you think about the night parade, it's this idea of pandemonium, right? These things are in the streets and they're wrecking stuff and they're breaking stuff and some of them are vengeful. And the barrier between the human world and the supernatural world is broken down, and there's tricksters and evil spirits and they're running amok. But let's look at that word, pandemonium, because you know how I like to do. Basically, it means the place of all demons, right? It's from the Greek, right? Pan, which means all, and daemon, which means spirit, right? Pan is straightforwardly Greek. But daemon is more philosophically loaded because it doesn't mean demon in the Christian sense. It was just flattened into evil spirit. It didn't mean that at all to the Greeks. It meant an intermediary spirit, something between gods and humans, a kind of a genius, what became known as a genius, or animating intelligence. Socrates had what he called his daemonium, which was like sort of like an interior voice that kept him from doing the wrong thing. And it wasn't good or evil, it just was a presence, it was a spirit force, and it was they were attached to particular people or places, and that was accepted. Interestingly, pandemonium is not a Greek word. It was coined by John Milton when he wrote Paradise Lost. In Paradise Lost, it's the name of the capital city of hell. So the place of all demons. And he built as a portmanteau that he built from Greek, but the word itself is his invention. And by that time, it's 1667, demon just had been collapsed into malevolent entity.
Bad spirits that work for Satan.
Bad spirits that work for Satan. Mm-hmm. Instead of the more neutral valence that it had for however many, millennia before that. So if you restore that word's pre-Christian meaning, we're not talking about hell. We're talking about something closer to the place where all the intermediary spirits are gathered, which is a pretty good description of the night parade. And it's a pretty good description of the Mexico City Mannequins. It's like their presences, their intelligences that are adjacent to human life, and they're neither good nor evil, but they occupy an intermediary zone, like people. And so the night parade isn't chaos invading order, it's the other order asserting itself in the absence of the usual inhabitant. So when the Paseo de la Reforma emptied out during lockdown, something that had always been there, adjacent to the human world, shaped by proximity to the human world, excluded from visibility by human density, right? Because it may all be there the whole time, just not noticeable, had this brief little window to exist and to explore the spaces it had already inhabited. And we would do the same thing. I think of the little mammal people that came out of their hiding places after the dinosaurs went extinct because they couldn't. And then when that space was cleared, they were like, what's going on? And then it's us, right? When you think of it like that, it's not a monster story. The Mexico City Mannequins weren't aggressive, right? The one that ran towards that guy and scared the crap out of him was probably just going like, hey guys, I too want to drink a beer. Look at me, I too am person. Let's go to a bar. And they were all, they screamed and ran away. The other one climbed into a sewer. One ran into an empty house. They weren't trying to pick a fight. They weren't trying to frighten people. So it's not a monster story. It's not even really a ghost story. If you think about it in the usual sense, it's more like an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that's my presentation for the class.
Oh my goodness.
Holy cannoli. Oh.
Well, thank you, Professor Tom.
Yeah.
I am exhausted. I need a snack.
Yeah. Haunted Dolls 472.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
It's a lot of work.
It was a lot. I wanted to get into the ontological, like what is it? What do people think it might be? What is it?
It's so much more interesting and evocative and frankly refreshing than like all the stories of haunted dolls end up seeming very, very silly I mean,
Chucky.
scary, sure, but like, yeah,
Yeah.
Chucky.
Exactly.
I saw Chucky,
Which is based on
when
Robert,
I was,
right? Like, I'm assuming.
Is it?
It is. I'm pretty
I
sure.
mean, I saw Child's Play when I was too young, and
Ooh.
and
That'll do things.
It went and stuck with me for a good long while. And then there's a car that parks on my street with a Chucky doll barbed wired to its fender. Anyway,
I think it's an evolutionary adaptation, which, remember what you said during the Mexico City Mannequins thing, where it's like they look like corpses or sick people. And so the idea is there's a thing that you don't understand, you don't know what it is. You should probably assume that it doesn't mean you any good. You
Like
should
lights.
probably
Like, don't follow the lights, right?
Yeah, just make some space between you and it.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we do with animals. It's what we do with elements. One thing I was thinking throughout this, because I love the spread of all I love that you laid out lots of different variants in the haunted doll universe, so that you could really see that there could be a lot of different things going on, like the idea that the mannequins, even though to me that's the most terrifying image I can even think of,
Legit.
could mean you less harm than the Robert doll, which of course is scary looking, but also it just seems like kind of like what Jordan was saying, like silly almost, like this is wild to me, but the way it made people feel, I totally believe to a degree. Like,
for sure, yeah.
If there's like something strange about an object that is giving everyone an icky feeling, I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna pay attention.
I mean, I see a big spider that in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I am afraid for the day. So,
Sure.
So,
Sure.
and that's a very natural phenomenon.
It's smart.
And it's
adaptive.
good for us. But I guess my question is, as an ongoing person who is like interested in these subjects and has been my whole life, like, but doesn't want to live in constant anxiety, panic, and fear, doesn't want to be filled with terror by every unfamiliar thing. You know what I mean? It's like how like what are like the stances and the postures that you can develop around these stories and around like I don't want to spend all my days like praying that I never see this longer and longer list of things, which is actually kind of where I'm at currently. I'm like, please, never a gray alien, never a Nordic, please, never a haunted doll. Never.
No moving, no walking mannequins, please.
No red eyes. No. Never red eyes. Never. You know what I mean? This list is getting so long, and I'm just trying to figure out. I don't know if you guys have recommendations for me. I'm like, do you just keep your list and you just like fold it under your pillow and just say like, please God, like never, or is there a way for me to be braver?
I think you got to go the other direction. I think you got to go the other direction and say, no matter what I see, is fine. It's fine. Like, it's fine. You can have preferences, sure, but like recognizing that at the end of the day, you don't really get to control what comes into your life. Like, you don't get to control like the experiences you have. Like, every experiencer, like almost every experiencer that I've heard heard stories from, people who, witness hauntings or, have contact with non-human intelligences or whatever, right? Like, none of them are like, that's what I was looking for. That's what I wanted. Like, it's mostly like, now I have to deal with this. And,
right.
And I think that, and the faster that people become sort of, I think to some degree, soft and willing to sort of metabolize whatever happened. I mean, I think immediately of Michael Singer. And the reason I thought of Michael Singer is because I brought up like how seeing a spider can ruin my day. And that's not really true. But like, I get really uncomfortable when there's a spider, right on the wall outside of the shower as I'm getting out of the shower. I get uncomfortable, and Michael Singer always talks about how, you can see a snake a little distance off and you think, I don't want to get any closer to that snake, and that's fine. But then like, if to the degree that you are, sort of psychologically resistant to the idea of the snake, to the presence of the snake, the more scary the snake will become until it's all you can think about.
Right.
And then you're like spending your whole life being like, I hope I don't see another snake. Ah!
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
Which is sort of the wrong response. It's because it's just going to weigh you down. It's going to, and so I think this is kind of that with all of this stuff. It's like, well, can you like say, ooh, that's scary, huh? I guess I'll let that go, move on to the next thing. And then, like, maybe one day it doesn't strike you as scary anymore. It's like, well, because you start to learn the contours of it. Like, that haunted doll is not going to do anything to me unless I take a picture of it without its permission.
Oh my gosh.
Which I
But what if you don't know the rules? What if you don't know the rules, Jordan? Which we often don't. We don't until somebody dies.
Okay,
because they walk up and touch the alligator. The alligator looks like it would be my friend.
Okay. Pursuant to this, I used to live out in the country in the Piedmont, in North Carolina.
Right.
There was a big cat preserve, and I was standing by some 20-foot tall fence, and there was a tiger there, a legit 400-pound tiger.
Wow.
Who decided to roar at me. This thing was 6 feet away. It was easily 100 decibels. I could smell its meat breath, and it looked at me with dead eyes, and I was like, oh, wow. Were it not for that fence,
oh, wow,
I would be lunch, just done. And
casually, your life is over.
Just bye. No, not even a prayer. And so, yes, there are things in this world that will straight up kill you, like prosaic things, just lightning, and tigers. But most of them won't. This is the thing. We just are not surrounded by light. We're lucky, but we're not surrounded by life-threatening entities and phenomena anymore. And to say all inhabited dolls or haunted dolls are evil Chuckies that are going to grab a knife from the kitchen, it's not the case. Now, there is malevolence for sure, but what are the rules? What are the rules? Well, if you're in front of a tiger that's hungry, the rules are, I don't know. Kiss your ass goodbye, probably the rule. But but other than that, you meet the entity, you acknowledge the entity, you treat it with respect. Right?
Yep.
Respect feels like a really good rule of thumb.
It does.
It's just like we just assume that everything that we encounter could have a plan and power that I don't completely understand.
That's a good assumption.
And I think the most comforting takeaway is what you said, Tom, which is, most of these things won't kill you. So,
that's right.
That's fine. Some of them might, but you know what? We're all going to die eventually.
Great stories, our reward will be great in heaven.
Yes.
How old was Anne when she died? I just was wondering, Tom, do you think that Robert killed her? Just on the topic of things killing people. I was just curious.
I know nothing about Anne. I'd like to know when she died, because we do know that when Sheen died in 1974, that Reuter woman bought his house and Robert. So we can suppose one of two things. Either Anne preceded him in death, or when he died, she was like, bye-bye, and sold the house and everything in it, which included that damned doll, which I'm sure she was glad to be shed of, right?
Wait, so it was the other lady who sold it to a museum because she said she couldn't
who
have
donated it. That's right.
But then she died 3 months later.
Yep.
Do we know her age or her cause of death?
No, but she died 20 years after she bought that house and got the doll. She donated that doll in 1994. So no, I know nothing.
But then she died 3 months later.
Yeah, she could have had a heart attack. Who knows?
I don't
cancer. I think we're just giving Robert too much credit. I just think we are.
All right.
I'm sorry. I left the rails a bit ago.
Robert and his quick cancer curse. Spelled with
K's.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of quick reminders before you go. First off, if you haven't left a rating on your platform of choice, please do that. One of the first things people look at when they're judging a show by its cover is the number of ratings it has. So if you dig what we're doing, show it with stars. In the epilogue, we talked about Mallory's gluten-free experiment, the pros and cons of Western versus traditional Chinese medicine, and why we're suspicious of exercise equipment at the gym, which somehow devolved into a conversation about some of the grossest words we know. If you want to hear it, go to godsghostsufos.com or find the link in the description. See you next week, friends.